Meeting of the Maumelle Civil Service Commission to order. We're going to be a little short-handed tonight. Both Commissioners Peterson and Coney let me know this week that they were going to be unavailable, and if you haven't heard, our city attorney is a daddy again.
Yeah, cool.
And I think that maybe happened a little earlier than the plan, but the baby had other ideas apparently. But everybody's is doing fine, but he's not going to be here tonight. Our first order of business is old business, approval of the May 14 Commission regular meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve May 14th meeting minutes.
Have a motion, need a second?
I guess I'll second.
All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Yes, any opposed, no. Motion carries. Under new business, we had asked the HR and the chiefs to get together before this meeting and put together testing dates. I don't know if there's any reason for much discussion on that, but as you recall, HR basically sets the dates and the commission approves them. Let me ask you one thing on these oral interviews. That's not Valentine's Day, is it?
No, it is not.
Okay. We made that mistake once, and I said never again.
Correct. Yeah, both of those dates are off of Valentine's Day, and those, that is just a presentation of the exam dates based on the 2018 dates that we had, and we implemented from there. Talked to Lieutenant Ivy of the police department, asked how it went to have both the sergeant and lieutenant test in the same day, especially since they can test for both. He said it went well, so just following that same static idea with the police two positions on that Tuesday, and then the Wednesday following for the two positions for fire, and then following the next day with the fire battalion chief exam. Similar setup. It is during the 4th week of January as per the policy.
Right.
The rest of that follows the same logic that you requested me to follow with the 72 hours after the oral interviews to be completed to have the results to them. So what that does is it sets the oral interview dates on the normal regular monthly meeting and then the 2 weeks following, so that we're not double occupying this room for the council. City council as well. So those 2 dates following, and then putting each of the departments responsible for their promotion potential and assessment centers reflective according to that oral interview, so that we can get the final results to all those within that time frame you requested.
Okay.
That's all to complete everything by that Friday, March 1st, and then of course it's in line with what we did this year as well, just with the more attuned to that 72-hour result requirement.
Yeah, we pretty much always tried to wrap it up by the 1st of March, so that fits right in. The chief's obviously on board with this?
Talked to both of them, yes.
Yes, sir.
Last year there was or this year there was a conflict with lieutenants, captains, and battalion chiefs oral interviews the same night.
Shouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
From here on out, it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
Any additional discussion? I would entertain a motion to approve the testing dates.
Make a motion to approve testing dates for 2019 police and fire promotions.
I'll second that.
Okay.
All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed, no. Motion carries. After our last meeting, I was discussing with our city attorney some possible issues that he had on overlapping of entry-level list. And HR joined in that conversation. And I asked HR to check with other cities in the area to see how they handled that, and I'll let you report.
Sure. I spoke to City of Little Rock, City of North Little Rock, and the City of Conway. On all 3 of those, of course, being our closest neighbors city-wise, and a couple of the colleagues of mine in the HR field. They have the similar setup where the HR director or designee is the liaison to the Civil Service Commission. Talked with all of them. They don't have any specific written policy to deal with overlapping lists, kind of like similar to ours. But they said their process for going through that is simply following like the first in, first out of lists. So to that degree, I think our discussion was very brief, but what it does is anytime you have a standing list, that list must be fully exhausted with all candidates on it either being disqualified or passed. And then you hire from that one before you ever introduce the newly tested list. So if any point in time, say if we were to test mid-year, right now, we have an entry-level test that we did in October. If we did another entry-level test, we would have to exhaust or completely disqualify all the members of the entry-level test we did in October before this new test would be live and valid. So that way you also don't have any overlap of, since each entry-level test is different, has different questions, different makeup, different things like that, you don't have any convolution of, you know, would this person have fared better on a specific set of questions versus another set. So that's following their logic and their evaluation of the criteria, as well as the not in violation of any policies or anything like that. So simply just exhausting a full list before ever moving on to the next one. It does not prevent you from testing again, but you would not introduce that new results list until you were fully exhausted on the previous. If that makes sense, and I'll entertain any questions if you had any.
So you could have a situation where you were down to just one name on the previous list.
Correct. The policy allows the commission to basically, quote, exhaust a list when it has less than 3 favorable or applicable candidates
That was
remaining.
Can we?
So you
can we
can,
exhaust?
as a commission, actually exhaust a list. It does not necessarily disqualify any remaining candidates. So if you had less than 3, you could exhaust the list and introduce and request a new test. But those less than 3 qualified individuals from the previous list would then follow this logic of you would hire from one of those 3 or completely disqualify before moving to result 1 of the new test. So does that make sense? Answer that question?
Yes.
Okay.
And if the applicant 1 on the previous test was still the applicant 1 on the second test, they would still carry over.
Yeah, you would completely exhaust that previous list, and if they were disqualified, either disqualified or hired, then you would not do anything until you made that action, and then move to number 1 on the results list following.
Would you notify the first list that the second test is happening? I mean, or is it just done publicly to?
Well, anytime we do a test, it's a public
Just a
announcement
public.
for entry level. Correct.
Is that workable? Yes, sir, Chief.
If I do have a couple of questions just for clarification here. And I think we're working with cans, so if there are 2 people on the list, my first question is, can I consider the last 2 people on that list and the first person on the next list for my 3? My second question is, if I just have 2 people on the list, and I want to hire one of them, can I hire him without considering anybody on the other list? And then if there are 2 people on the list and I don't want to hire either one of them, can I go to y'all and ask y'all to kill the list? And those are, I get hypotheticals, and I don't have any particular person in mind, but those are 3 things that I would like to know.
I guess if you deemed it not hireable, then we could exhaust that list and go
Yeah.
to the next list.
I can answer the third question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can do that.
Yeah. And if you needed 3 and you hired 2 and there was only 2 on the list, you would immediately go to the new list.
No, I'm talking about, I just want to hire
Right.
one.
But if you hired 1,
Can I
You would-
consider the last 2 on the old list and the first one on the new list for my 3?
Well, you would essentially have a disposition for the previous two on the previous list before you would ever have the new list.
Right.
Correct?
No, I always have the rule of three, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So I would like still my rule
of
of three, even though my rule of three might be two on the old, one on the new. To have three candidates to pick from is what I would like.
Can you cross it? Can you use the first list and the second list?
We would have to exhaust
I
the
think
first
to
one.
that degree, once you reach less than three, applicable candidates on the first list, once you reach three or less, you request of the commission to authorize a new test. So they would deem the old list exhausted, even though you may still have up to three qualified candidates. But you would already have a disposition on them because you would have already had the testing and gone through backgrounds and interviews.
But there's nothing to prevent me from hiring one of the two remaining if I just want to pick from those two.
I would believe so. That would be my.
I just wouldn't be able to get a third. At that point, I either hire one of those two or I ask you to exhaust the list because I don't have three and then immediately go to the new list.
Yes.
So you're saying I can't combine the two?
Not as I understand it.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
All right, and like I said, that's fine. I just don't want to
Yeah.
run afoul of
Yeah, if you,
civil service rules trying to do what I think is right. And clearly, as a chief, I want to get,
sure.
I would love to have 10 people to pick from, you know. We want as many people as we can to pick to get our best possible applicants. So, and that's certainly livable. That's something we can do. I just want to make sure that we don't
And-
color outside the lines there.
And you would let us know that we're down below three.
Correct.
And that,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that,
I
and
can-
we can make that decision on whether or not to exhaust that list and
Yes.
get a new
Wait.
test to.
If we ever did make it below three on an applicable list before we were eligible for a new, typically we have an annual testing
Right.
cycle. If we were exhausted prior to that time frame, then if the chiefs were going to request one or anticipated one, then they would indicate, I would like three candidates, and then that would trigger me to let you know, and them know there are now less than three. We would
In
likely
the
have
first
to.
list.
Yeah.
But prior to doing that, again, if there were two people on the list and I really, really liked one of them, you wouldn't immediately say, hey, we've got
No, that would.
under three now, so you've got to kill this list.
No,
No,
it's
no,
the
no.
option of the commission to exhaust the
Right.
list if you have three or less.
Well, what I'm getting is what drives that. May I keep that list if
You
I
would
want?
request
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Perfect, perfect.
Yeah, sorry, to just make the clarification that exhausted list does not mean disqualified list.
Right.
It just means less than three qualified.
Is, this gonna be written up and put it into policies or?
Well, I have one more question.
It probably ought to be written up and put it into the policies.
To who, and this might not even be a question for here, this might be a me and you tomorrow after staff meeting question. But if we are fixing to kill the list, who should notify the two people, say, for instance, who should notify the two people that are currently on the list that they do need to take the next list because the list is going to expire without us hiring them? Is that something you should do or I should do? And again, if that's something we
Well-
can talk about later, that's cool too.
Technically, in that scenario, they have the option to either test during the annual cycle, but
Right, but to be fair, I would let them know, hey, because they think they're on a hireable list. I'd like to let them know you're not.
Okay.
You're fixing to not be.
then I would contend that that's an option for you as chief if you wish.
Very good.
I don't know that that would be a standing
That makes sense to me. yeah.
order of communication.
Because we did have a dispatcher almost fall into that scenario when I asked him had you taken the new test, and he said, no, I'm still on the list. And,
Yep.
May not be next week.
Yeah, we don't want that.
That makes sense
Yep,
to me.
yep.
Thank y'all very much.
Can HR write that up in a,
I will make my best attempt and
yeah,
then
it's a
run
little
it through legal for a communication
Yeah, it's a little
standpoint.
complex, it really is.
Mhm.
That looks like something that we ought to at least consider adding to our rules and regs,
Yeah,
so everybody's clear on it.
and like some other things we've done, you gotta leave it open for these special circumstances. You know?
folks, they do come up.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think there's any rush to have to get that done, but, let's work along those lines, and we'll take a look at it somewhere down the road here.
Sounds good.
Okay, the fire department is requesting a mid-year testing date for captain and battalion chief due to a recent promotion. Chief? You get up and down about like I do.
I know, I'm getting old. I actually talked to Director of Zone today, and I don't think we're gonna ask for that at this time. By the time you actually laid the stuff out there, had them study, turn around and take a test, we're gonna be 2.5, 3 months away from the next test cycle anyway. So I just told him, I said, you know, if something does come up in that time period, we could just use the interim position, where I could come before you guys and ask for an interim position on that. So that way we maintain the test cycle and we stay exactly where we're at.
Your original reason for this request was what? Are you down to?
We actually, last Monday night, got a training chief position, so that's gonna exhaust the division chief and the captain's list that is actually out there. We only had one person on each, so, we're still okay. We've got one person still that's gonna be left on the lieutenant's list, but, we won't have a captain or a division chief.
Tell you a funny story. Hopefully it won't embarrass Harvey. It shouldn't, because it's autocorrect. But he was communicating with me about this, and I get this email from him and said y'all had created a position of battalion chief for tanning, and I'm like,
Oh,
what?
okay.
What are they doing over there? Supposed to be training.
Yeah,
Don't
Got
let
a
the
little
police
too
know
close
about
to the
that.
fire.
yeah, exactly. All right, thank you, guys.
All right. Any additional comments? Except Woo Pig.
Okay.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
I'll second it.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed? No. Motion carries.
0-0.